Australian cinema has another magnificently talented Prince of Darkness to emerge as a major force in 2017, dropping Jaws and spreading a serious case of the heebie-jeebies. Tasmanian-born writer-director Damien Power's holiday from ill thriller Killing Ground combines great aesthetic elegance, including beautiful cinematography and naturalistic editing, with an acrid, lingering foulness, derived from knife-edge performances and a terrifying premise executed with airtight verisimilitude. After a world premiere at the 2016 Melbourne International Film Festival, the film's theatrical release arrives not long after Ben Young's ostentatious, soul-sucking debut Hounds of Love, making this a vintage year for hotshot homegrown spooksters. Killing Ground's plot revolves around Sam Harriet Dyer and Ian Meadows venturing into the bush for New Year's Eve to camp at a secluded riverbank Ian recalls from his youth. Camping in the bush, a big, body fluid leaking, limb-blopping mistake. Photograph John Platt. The audience understand before they do that this is a big, body fluid leaking, limb-blopping mistake. Killing Ground belongs to a pantheon of Aussie outback films that welcome visitors to their bucolic settings in the same way a rusty meat hook at an abattoir welcomes a fresh carcass. This is the cinema of Long Weekend, Razorback and Wolf Creek. But in many ways Killing Ground feels more like Deliverance Down Under, sans the canoe trips down the river and the commentary about class divide and city slicker snobbery. The pivotal gears of Power's self-written screenplay are, nevertheless, turned by atavistic, pig-shooting ruffians, who are capable of inflicting infinitely more terror than any of the non-human beasts roaming the landscape. While the couple in Long Weekend, played by John Hargreaves and Brian E. Behetz, absconded to the coast to attempt to save their marriage, Sam and Ian are on the opposite end of the nuptial journey, with one about to pop the question. Opening images depict home-aiming the gum trees Australiana, a kind of lush, visual bush poetry Henry Lawson by way of, well, deliverance. Power and his cinematographer, Simon Chapman, who shot Servant to Slave and Joe Sank's Consolation, frame exterior shots of Sam and Ian's car from behind. Their perspective is distanced, symmetrical and greenery-flanked, communicating that while the primary characters may be in the center of the frame, and of the story, they are not the center of this universe. More powerful forces are at play. The pair stop en route to pick up beer and bubbly, having a fleeting encounter with a grizzled local, German Aaron Pedersen, who will come into play later. When Sam and Ian arrive at their destination, they are initially disappointed to discover they're not the only people there, though that disappointment soon gives way to far more distressing emotions. A family has arrived before them: Rob Julian Garner, Margaret Meyer-Stang, a nightmare-addled 16-year-old daughter, Mt. Arnie Copeland, and their toddler son, Ollie, played by twins Liam and Riley Parks. In separate scenes, German and his similarly rough-as-guts mate Chuck and Glenn Arnie mingle at the pub, the former barking about how he'll never tolerate doing any more time in the can. The scary stuff is in the mail, of course, and given the film's small cast it's not hard to envision who might have a hand in it. The story threads involving the three groups of people are not necessarily ordered in the way one expects, which complicates matters. Instead of drawing attention to the non-linear arrangement and potentially turning it into a gimmick, Power and his editor, Katie Flaxman, go the other way, weaving the tangents together subtly. Sometimes something small, like a character wearing a different t-shirt, is the only visual signal that the timeline has changed. The elegance of Power's approach belies the extremities of his blood-splotched, hard-nosed story, which, as the film escalates conflicts and scampers towards closure, is more than grim, borderline misanthropic, perhaps. So much presence, so bloody scary. Chuck Aaron, Glenn Arnie and German Aaron Pedersen. Photograph John Platt. For faultless performances from the primary cast bristle with itchy energy, either panicked Dyer and Meadows or malicious Pedersen and Glenn Arnie. Unlike John Jarrett from Wolf Creek, or other shit-eating, drool-wiping human yetis of his ilk, Pedersen and Glenn Ain's villains, so much presence, so bloody scary, cannot be relegated to the realms of cartoonish grotesque weary. Their acting is simply too good, too realistic, for that the scriptwriting too measured and thoughtful. And unlike Deliverance, Power is mostly uninterested in critiquing the gulf between rural and city people, the urbanite versus the hick. Instead, though it's easy to miss the single line of dialogue that explains this about the camping site once being the location of a massacre of the Curry people by settlers, Killing Ground is about white guilt. It is an ambitious intellectual perspective to wrap around an ordinarily trope-clogged cinematic experience, with no footnotes or cheat sheets on how that subtext can be best dissected. The title may or may not apply to the present, no spoilers, but it certainly applies to the past. Some audiences won't, of course, be in the mood to consider such analysis. And fair enough. Like Hounds of Love, Killing Ground is beautifully made and utterly disturbing.